So my name is Grace Corrigan, and I want to thank you for joining us today. I'm an employment specialist for INCIGHT, and today's session is being recorded. Ask you to, keep your cameras on. We love to see your smiling faces, but if you would leave your audio muted, that would be great. It eliminates any background noise for the speakers. And then after the presentation is completed, we're going to open it up for question and answer discussion. But if you do have some sort of question during the presentation, you're welcome to type that in the chat, and we will, of course, address it at the appropriate time. So I had on my list 29 new job seekers that I've never had come to my event before. So definitely welcome if this is your first time here. We're excited to have you. And I want to just tell you a little bit about INCIGHT, that we're a nonprofit organization. We were founded back in 2004. And our mission is changing hearts and minds, leveraging obstacles, and unlocking potential. So we do this through two of our programs. One is education and the other is employment. And both programs focus on helping individuals with disabilities and barriers of any kind. If you're interested in finding out more about our programs, you can call us or you can go to our website, which is INCIGHT.org. So jobsnow.org is actually the website for our employment program. And one of the ways we connect with job seekers is through these virtual GetAhead events, which are standalone workshops created to give job seekers from all walks of life additional tools and resources for their job search, career search. And if you're interested in viewing past events, or if you want to see this event again, you can go to jobsnow.org, go to the GetAhead tab, and we have previously recorded sessions there, as well as by tomorrow, we should have this session up and running as well. Now, one of the other ways we connect with job seekers is through job fairs. So our next in-person job fair is coming up on Tuesday, June 20th. And it's going to be at Southeast Works Career Center, just off of Foster and 64th. And I will be sending out advertisements and registration for that probably next week. So
is that in Portland?
Yep. It's off Southeast Foster and 64th. So yes, it is in Southeast Portland.
Not all of us are familiar with the Portland streets, so city would be nice to include. Sorry.
Oh, that's all right. Okay, so we will just move on, I guess, to the resume makeover. And our guest speakers today are Yesenia Salas and Samantha Vernon. They are from OPB. They both have a background in human resources and talent acquisition. And I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to the ladies. They can introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about themselves, and then they will share their presentation with you.
Hi, can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
Is this presentation going to be shared via email or just go to jobsnow.org to watch the presentation in case we want to refer to it?
Yeah, I will put that website in the chat, but it will be up and available probably by late afternoon today, where you can just go and click on it and watch it again.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Well, thank you, Grace, for having us. We are so excited to share some of the knowledge about resumes that Samantha and I have acquired through the years of human resources experience that we have, and hopefully that we're providing some tips to help folks stand out with their resume.
Yeah, I can start by introducing myself. My name, again, is Samantha Vernon, and I go by she, her. And my contact information is on one of the slides, so you'll have that available if you have questions after the presentation. Like Grace said, I've been in human resources and talent acquisition for about 5 or 6 years now. Done that with several nonprofits before coming into Oregon Public Broadcasting, and yeah, really happy and excited to share my knowledge with you folks and talk through some of the basics of creating a resume.
Yeah, Samantha and I have similar experiences in terms of our human resource experience. I too come from a social service agency. That's where I got my start in human resources. So like you heard, Grace, my name is Yesenia Salas, people and culture generalist. And my pronouns are she, her. You can contact me via the email address listed there. You can also connect with us on LinkedIn if you'd like as well.
And then just a bit of housekeeping. Grace already said this, but we'll ask you to keep yourself muted throughout the presentation, but we do want to hear from you. So we'll encourage you to use that chat function, and we'll do our best to monitor that throughout the presentation. I know if folks are watching on their phones, the chat can get a little tricky, but we'll have time at the end for you to unmute yourself and ask questions then as well. All right, and these are some of the things we're going to be going through today. We mentioned some resume basics, do's and don'ts. We'll talk through summary and objective, talk about some different resume formats, and we're going to just touch on cover letters just briefly and how they tie into your resume. And then, like I said, we'll have time for questions at the end.
All right. So you've heard a bit about us and you've seen what we have in the agenda that we'll be covering today. So we'd love to learn a bit about you. If you could, in the chat, maybe state your name and what you'd like to get out of the session. Or I guess your name will be on there with the chat, but yeah, let us know what you'd like to get out of the session today. We'll give it a minute or so here to kind of get a sense of what folks are thinking. Put it in the chat, please.
Seeing tips and tricks, more info on ATS. It's been a while since you've done a resume. Sending a lot of resumes but not getting interviews, that's really tough. Want to be inspired to update your resume? Love to see that.
Okay, some enhancing skills and resume coaching, tool building, looking for more ways to be efficient in creating and updating a resume, crafting a resume according to today's accepted standards. Yeah, we'll talk about what is contemporary. All right, hoping to learn how to best present my skills and choppy employment history. We'll cover that as well. Okay, switching from chronological to functional. Samantha's going to share all sorts of stuff around that. Okay. Someone's been out of the workforce for a while, is a bit older. We'll talk about some techniques for that, do's and don'ts. Oh, we have a slide just for that. And on that note, I think let's go ahead and start to get into the slides here.
Right, let's do that.
So what purpose does a resume serve? If I could ask you to please use the chat again, or actually even speak up if there's a participant or two that might be willing to raise their hand here in Zoom and let us know what you think a resume should do. What's its purpose?
I'll go.
Go for it.
I have the fortunate ability to be on the hiring committee for Policy Council at Kidco Head Start here in Lynn County. So what I look for in a resume is, can I see what this person's qualifications, experience, and their, and I'm trying to think of the word for it, but qualifications, experience, and get a sense of, are they a good fit in 10 to 30 seconds? Because I have a lot of other paperwork that I have to look at also. So that is what, I'm not an employer, but as part of a hiring committee, as part of the team, that is what I personally look for.
Thank you for that. I see someone that said it's a marketing tool to get you a job interview in the chat. Yeah. Okay. All right. So yes, according to Indeed, and you were spot on there in sharing what you shared there. So the goal and overall purpose of a resume is to introduce your qualifications and skills to employers. It's an informational document that tells your career story. It's outlining all the details in an easily read format. Thank you, everybody, for participating.
Yeah, someone mentioned it's a snapshot. I really like that approach. Like it's a quick snapshot of your skills, your experience, your accomplishments. Someone else said highlight how awesome I am. I like that too. That's a great way to start. Yeah, I think, like you said, just really a quick snapshot. I appreciate that insight into how quickly you're looking at resumes, because we're looking a lot too, and it is a quick snapshot of that. And we're going to talk through some do's and don'ts that'll be helpful in giving that recruiter just a quick snapshot as they look at your resume, so that they don't pass you on. So we'll talk about do's and don'ts next.
Also, for me, keep your audience in mind, because if you're applying to be a teacher and you have spelling errors in your resume, that doesn't bode well for you.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Thank you.
Definitely. So yes, resume do's, right? Let's talk about those first. So use a clean and simple format. So what does that mean? For us, it means that your resume is free of clutter, such as graphics, or there's too much color or other things that can be distracting. Somebody earlier in the chat mentioned ATS, and we'll talk about that a bit later. But when folks are applying, you're in most cases, unless you're sending your resume out via email, you're applying through an ATS system if you're applying online. And so sometimes if your resume has too much going on, the system may not know how to take that information and put it in the right spaces so that your information is filtering out correctly. So it means that your resume may not actually come through in the way that you want it to. So keep that in mind, but some really important general guidelines, right, to have this clean and simple format is, find font that is easy to read. So like Times New Roman is a good one, or Arial or Calibri, right? Those are some examples. That your font size is maybe 11 to 12 point font size. And then maybe your headings are a little bit larger, maybe they're bold. And so by a little bit larger, I mean like 14 points or so. So those are some tips and tricks there to keep it clean and simple. And somebody just talked about typos and spelling errors. Yes, that is a big one. So you want to review your resume to make sure that it doesn't have it. There are some things you can do. You can obviously read your resume out loud to yourself. You can also just sit back and use if you're using Microsoft, use the read out loud function to hear how your resume is going to sound. And then also look at your resume, right? You want to, when you're reading it, is it your, or is it your, is it its or its, right? So they sound the same, but they're spelled differently. So keep an eye out for that and talk to a friend. Getting a second pair of eyes is going to be really helpful, just because we all, miss things sometimes. So that's key. Let's talk about prioritizing relevant keywords. So use the keywords that are relevant for the industry or the position. So if you have experience in those areas, make sure that you're really capturing it. So an example of how that would show up, right? So if I was to go and apply for a position that involves managing the hiring process, right? I could phrase my skills within the context of recruitment, or I could choose to say talent acquisition. And so they're both really covering the same thing, but I would make that determination based on what I see in that job post. How are they talking about the position, right? I want to use the same type of language. Customizing your resume, prioritizing relevant keywords in itself. That's a specific example of how you are customizing your resume. You can take it a step further, right? And customize it to the position, right? So we're going to touch on that more when we talk about specifically tailoring resumes. So you'll hear more on that. But do remember that this is a living document. And so with every position that you're applying to, that's another iteration of your resume. So because it's applicable to that role. So always keep that in mind. And, when it comes to highlighting your achievements, Yeah, someone in the chat said, show how awesome I am. Yes, this is your time to shine. So you're going to want to, quantify your achievements. You're also going to want to use action verbs. So like managed, educated, facilitated, develop, those kinds of words that are really going to help you stand out. And finally, remember to save your file so that it includes your name. You want the recruiter or the panel person, whoever is reviewing your resume, to see that.
All right. Thank you, Yesenia. Let's talk through some don'ts. That's the first one. Don't just copy and paste your work experience, your job description into your work experience section. So it won't do what some of the things that Yesenia said about customizing your resume and really prioritizing relevant keywords and highlighting what is most important. It's just a summary of all of your job duties, so it won't be as relevant. So I wouldn't suggest doing that. Someone in the chat asked what file format is best. We'll talk more about that later, but we would suggest a PDF. Don't include long paragraphs. I can't tell you how often that Yesenia and I receive resumes where the title of their previous position will be listed, and then it's a long paragraph about everything that they did in that position. And so I can see how that's tempting to write out, and it's easier maybe to write a paragraph, but it's harder for the recruiter and the hiring manager to sift through and find those important keywords and really try to understand where your skills are highlighted. So I wouldn't recommend long paragraphs. We'd recommend bullet points. Don't exclude dates pertinent to your work experience. Sorry, I see a hand. I can answer a question.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Could you go back and just go over the differences between job descriptions and work experience a little? Because I actually just applied for a position yesterday that asked me to do that. And I did just that because I didn't know what they were asking. I didn't understand. So if you could clarify the difference, that would be greatly appreciated for me.
Yeah, I think the way that I'm interpreting this is like if I have a position description for my current job, rather than copy and pasting that position description, really highlighting what's important within that position description that's relevant to the new job that I'm applying for. Does that make sense? So I know that takes some work to do and really pulling out some of those bullet points to make new points in your resume. But I do think it's important rather than copy and pasting, because it's going to be a lot. I mentioned down lower, don't include irrelevant work experience. And there's likely that within your position description that you currently have, it's not all going to be relevant to the new position. So we wouldn't recommend just highlighting and pasting. Go ahead, Yesenia.
And PJ, that is an example when we talk about customize your resume, that is what we mean, right? So like putting those things together is just like Samantha said, pull those things out. What is important? So you have your job here, what you've done, you have what you want to do, right? And what from here translates over here to what you want to do. What's going to get you there? And that's what you want to really focus on and emphasize.
So is this an opportunity then for me to, because I'm, thinking when I'm writing, creating my resume that you don't want it too long, is this an opportunity to maybe highlight some other experience or skills for that specific job and just, to highlight some other things, or is it specifically from the resume only? Am I making this more complicated than it needs to be?
I think if I'm understanding correctly, and Sam, if you heard something else, let me know. But what I'm hearing you say is like, is it do I have to pull it from over here? Well, from my job description. Well, what you are actually really pulling from is your experience of things that you've done in one job or another. So you're thinking through your repertoire of like, I've done this. I worked at Starbucks. I worked at, McDonald's. I worked in a reception office. What of these skills of all the duties that I've done, like what is actually relevant to this position that I'm applying for? And then making that sound not like a description, right? But really highlighting those achievements within those positions.
Okay, thank you. That was really helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Yesenia. Great. So we talked a little bit about not doing the long paragraphs. Bullet points are important. Don't exclude dates pertinent to your work experience. This can be tempting if you have maybe done some job hopping or if you have gaps in your resume. But for Yesenia and I will say for myself, especially if I'm looking at a resume and it doesn't have any dates, it's really hard to determine if you have the experience required for the position. So in a lot of position descriptions, in the minimum requirements of the position, it may say 3 years management experience, for example. So I can't see that quickly in your resume if you didn't include dates. And it does also look like you might be hiding something. And so it's better to just be honest and be clear about the dates where you work places so that I can make my own judgments on that and see if you meet those minimum requirements. And on the topic of dates, don't exclude dates pertinent to your work experience, but other dates, like maybe the date of, in terms of education, your dates that you have listed, I would suggest, this is something that I see in just a tip, people a lot of times will include their high school graduation date. And I will say that that gives away your age right away. And so Yesenia and I have done a lot of work around recruiting biases and not being biased about how long someone's been out of high school, for example, or how short someone's been out of high school, how recent. But not every recruiter has done that kind of biased work around their recruiting processes. So it does open up an opportunity for an employer to maybe be biased about how far it's been since you graduated high school or how recent it's been. So that's just a tip on our end that we think might be helpful to avoid opening up that opportunity for bias. Don't include irrelevant work experience. So we talked a little bit about that job description, sort of copy and pasting or finding relevant bullet points. If you have lots of duties in a job, for example, in my previous job, I did a lot of work with talent acquisition, with recruiting, and also with training. But in my job now, I don't do any work with training. It's very limited. So I would maybe not include as much information about training in my resume because it's not as relevant to the job that I'm applying for. Let's see, I'm trying to monitor the chat as well. Sorry, I might have, did I miss that last bullet point, Yesenia, or did I get it all?
I believe you got it all. Did you get the
Okay, great.
Yeah. And so, yeah, some messages. I think you answered, Samantha, in the your conversation about dates, and somebody's talking about what if your experience is over a decade old and irrelevant experience, and you really covered that. And then just talking some chatter here about degrees. Thank you. I love that everybody's engaged. So highlighting skills, right? So there are two types of skills you can include in your resume. So one is what we consider harder technical skills, one category. Then the other is soft skills. So examples of hard skills could be if you know a foreign language or you know some industry-specific software programs, right? That's like the technical part of that. Now soft skills are how you engage, really. So it's like communication and problem solving. Are you creative? So they're really more attitudes rather than technical skills. So it's important to know the difference. When you are looking to transition careers, right, then that's where we tend to see people using those soft skills more, because you may not have all the technical things, right? You may not know what, kind of systems they use in banking if you worked, in, I don't know, automotive care. So you want to really then use those soft skills to your advantage in situations like that, along with some other tactics that Samantha will talk about later. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and move us into an exercise. So for the next set of slides, you're going to see some resumes, and we'd love to hear which ones you keep and which ones you'd pass on. So let me give you a scenario. So you are in charge of reviewing resumes, right? That is your role in this situation here. But you have some constraints, right? So some of these things are, one, you are limited on the amount of time that you can review resumes, because guess what? That's not your only job. You have several other job obligations. And so if it's not clear here, what we're trying to do is put you in the frame of mind of in the recruiter or talent acquisition specialist shoes, right? So that you can get a sense of what they're thinking. So anyway, short period of time, right, to review these. You have also never done the job that you're recruiting for, right? Because you work in human resources or you work in talent acquisition. You only know what the job is based on what a manager has told you, that hiring manager, and what's on that job description, which is what creates this job post, right, that a job seeker would see. And finally, most candidates are asked to apply online. And because your company receives so many applications, you use an ATS, an applicant tracking system, to help you filter them out. Now, on a side note, OPB's ATS does not do that. Samantha and I are looking at every single resume and reading those and making those decisions. But it is important to know that a lot of companies do, those bigger organizations, they are going to use ATS systems that will help parse out the data and then filter. So anyway, knowing all of these constraints, right? What resumes might you choose and which ones might not make the cut? So here's the first one.
So this one's hard to read, but what right away, what impression right away do you get of this resume? I'm curious, and you can say it in the chat.
Without being able to see the resume, I can't make any determination. I'm a visual person.
Sure, yeah, it's tough if you can't see, but I'm hearing in the chat also a couple of folks saying very long. So right away, it's 3 pages long. And so someone mentioned at the very beginning that when they look at resumes, they're looking maybe 10 to 30 seconds, I think they said. It's a quick look. And so for 3 pages of material, we're probably not going to make it through all 3 pages. I'm seeing right away the objective at the top and then looking at experience, but I don't know that I'm going to make it all the way to that back page. So a good best practice is to try to keep a resume to 1 page. I would say 2 pages max, but 1 page is preferable.
All right, so let's take a look at this next one. For the person who said they're very visual, hopefully you can read this resume here, that the font is large enough to read. But let's go ahead and take a minute or so to read through this particular portion of the resume and think about what are the things that are wrong with it. Can everybody read it okay? And if not, I can read it out loud. But
I am on a tablet. Where are you? I don't know where to look for this resume. You're asking if we can see it. I have no idea where to look for it.
You might not be able to see on a tablet. I'm sorry. We're sharing our screen. So
Sharing your screen. Yeah. I'm able to do that with other meetings. I'm not understanding why I can't do that here.
that's okay. We'll talk through it, so you'll get a sense. And then we'll also send out the slides later, so you'll be able to connect the dots. Somebody said here, spelling errors. Yes.
tense.
Sense.
Is everybody else able to see that?
Can I say something? So the resume is not like one word responsible. It should start with serve, guess, to create memorable. It has to start with an active verb. And if the job was in the past, all the verbs has to written in the past or present. But it never start with a responsible, and the other ones apply is fine, guided is correct, and so on. Yeah, I found that mistake.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, so somebody mentioned here, severing is incorrect. Yes. So if we responsible for severing guests, right, versus responsible for serving guests. So severing and serving, 2 very big different things. And so that is an obvious mistake, right? But here's the thing, because even if you're using spell check, right, severing is a word, so it's not going to catch that. That's where having a friend or read it, or you using the read aloud function is going to be helpful, right? So there's some other ones. Apply comprehensible knowledge, right? So that doesn't quite make sense. That sentence is off, right? We have buffet, which is not the buffet meaning here.
And deserts versus desserts.
Great. Thank you.
Catch.
Forested, enjoyable, even, what does that mean?
I think they meant to say fostered.
And
Okay.
that's key. That's where you're going to get lost, right? If
Those are both words.
or Sam is reading that, we're going to, yeah, that's going to be confusing, and we'll know that
Easy.
someone's not paying attention.
Access? Easy access? What?
Yeah, there's quite a few spelling errors in that one, and some folks mentioned tense. So those are great call outs. What about this one? What about this next one? What are you seeing right away? What are your first impressions of this resume?
Oh my God, he looks
All
like a drug
squished
dealer.
together.
Don't think it's a good idea to put your picture on your resume?
Never.
It looks like a Blues
Yeah.
Brother is applying.
Somebody
it's
put in the
all-
chat, too many graphics. Yeah.
It's all squished together.
Mhm.
I can't,
would
it's
say,
not readable.
Yeah, I would agree 100% with the photo. That's another thing where we mentioned earlier with the high school diploma, like it opens up an opportunity for there to be bias against you. And so we wouldn't recommend putting a photo on your resume. Let them get a good impression of who you are based on what you're telling them, and get your foot in the door before they have an opportunity to see you.
Is it landscape versus portrait in orientation?
It might be, so that's not desirable, right? Someone here said picture might be acceptable for on-camera positions. I would agree with that. I don't know, Yesenia, if you have more to add on that in terms of like positions that we have.
Well, if
Yeah.
you're going to be on camera, you should include a headshot, not a picture on your resume.
Yeah, so it would just depend. So in our case, our broadcasting is so much of what we do is public radio, right? So I think that the thing, yes, so headshots. Another thing to keep in mind is going back to what Sam said, really about why when you put something out there, like a picture of you, it's going to open things up for bias to potentially happen. And here's the thing, some people may have what we call implicit bias. They don't know that they have a bias, but it's there, and that may surface. But you're right, there could be situations where someone headshot is going to be required. And if it's going to be required, you're probably going to see that in the application process, right, in the directions. So that's a good reminder to always read the instructions for how to apply to a position.
I just wanted to offer that I applied for a position once, and they requested a writing sample. I've applied for several positions that requested a writing sample. And the first time I submitted it, I didn't know how to submit, like, and so I included a piece that was published, and it had my picture attached to it, and I got feedback about that. And so it wasn't that my picture was on the front page, but it was on, and so I don't submit my writing samples that way, but just to share that experience,
Great.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah. So let's look at Ivy's resume here. So when I see this is music to this makes me happy. So I'm not getting lost in it, right? The format is clean and it's simple. I can read what is a heading and what is the context. There's bullet points. I can see that there's states, so I know when they worked where. I know their title. I know where they worked. There's a list of skills. So those are all things that I want to see. There's a summary so that they give me right off the bat who they are, right? So out of those 4, this one would make the cut. So think about that. We shared 4 resumes with you. This is the one. So, and recruiters are going through a lot of resumes, or the system maybe, right? The ATS. And so keep that in mind. What is a good resume and what might not serve you well?
Yeah, someone asked, if you can go back to that slide, actually, Yesenia. I do want to focus on the summary. Someone asked about the skills graphic in the previous resume with all the shaded text and the picture. I would avoid the graphics. That it makes it really just seem busy, and it's a little bit distracting. So just wanted to touch on that. And then this resume for Ivy, I do want to really focus on the summary. So we're going to talk next about summaries and objectives, and they're a little bit different, but really have the same purpose. And so the summary here, when I'm reading it, I'm looking at the resume, and right away at the very top, I'm seeing their name, their contact information, and then a quick summary of their experience. And it lists that they have 15 plus years of experience in this field. So really quickly, I'm getting a good picture of how experienced they are for the position. So you can move forward, Yesenia. Thank you. So again, this is going to be the first place that a hiring manager will really look. And a summary is just a short description of your qualifications and experience. This is another example, and it includes 5+ years of experience focusing on the intricacies of equipment and instrumentation. So really quickly, just that summary. An objective is similar, but might be more beneficial if you're shifting careers. So while a summary is really focusing on the experience you have, a resume objective is really focusing on the skills that you want to build and where your career goals are headed. So you might say, my objective is to be hired into this type of position with this type of organization.
Question, would the summary be almost the same as your elevator pitch?
Yeah, I suppose it could be, yeah. You might be using an elevator pitch in lots of different scenarios, like in person or at a resume function or a job fair, for example, but it can be very similar. Yes, I would keep it short and concise, but it can be similar to an elevator pitch. This slide shows a chronological versus functional. I know we got some questions about that in the chat. We will say that chronological is really the most contemporary and the most common form of resume that we see, but functional serves a purpose. So a functional resume might be more beneficial for you if you've had some spells of job hopping, if you've changed career paths maybe multiple times throughout your career, or if you're looking to change your career track now. Whereas a chronological resume, like I said, really the more common format. And that would be if you've held the same job or a similar job, if you're highly experienced in your field, if you're seeking a job that's similar to the one that you have. I've got a hand raised. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, this was really where I had some questions because, you know, when looking at whether I should pick present a chronological or functional resume, I've had several gaps in my experience due mostly to disability. So it's not, you know, from job switching. However, like for instance, my first my good experience I consider before I became really sick and became disabled was in human resources. I would like to get back into that field. So I can either put human resources experience from 20 years ago on my resume, or I can go in like I have no human resources experience. So I don't know how to navigate that.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think with a functional, and I'll show you an example in just a moment, but I think with a functional, what's great about that is that you're seeing at the top the summary or objective, and maybe you're doing an objective if you haven't been in that field for a while or shifting that into a different career. And then right away, you're seeing the skills that you have before I'm seeing your work history. And so as a recruiter, I'm reading through that objective and I'm reading through the skills, and I'm already impressed with you by the time I get to that history. And then I can think, oh, okay, they maybe haven't had experience for a while, but they clearly have the skills for the position because those are outlined beforehand. So I'm getting that impression first. So that's why I think that can be really beneficial, because I'm almost making a decision about you before I get to your work history. Does that make sense?
It does. And thank you. Would it be worthwhile to include something like that in my, you know, to speak to that in my, that I'm looking to get back into the field or something in the cover letter, in the summary?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You might in your objective say, my objective is to transition back into a human resources career or something similar to that. And then we'll touch on cover letters at the end, but you should definitely tie that in and talk about why you're making this transition and why that you would be a good fit for them.
And it looks like Charlotte has a question.
Yes, it sounded like for a functional resume that I would want to say a summary and an objective, because the summary would be, I have 5-10 years experience. And then the objective is I want to come back to that. I want to go into this new field with that experience. So which one is that? Is that a summary or an objective, or is it a combo?
It's kind of a combination, and you'll see in the example that I have for a functional resume, they did a summary rather than objective. So it's going to be a choice, and it's up to you. But I think I would say it's kind of like a combination. You should highlight the experience you have first, and then mention that you want to make a transition. Does that make sense?
Thank you. I just wanted to know if you would title it one or the other, if it's a combo.
Yeah, you might. I would probably title it a summary if it's a
Okay, thank you.
combination. I don't know, Yesenia, if you have anything more you want to add to that.
You know, I think that it just is a matter of like, which one is it more of? And so if it's really summarizing more of your skills, then that's the one you'd want to go with.
Great point. Great point. And this is an example of a chronological resume. So right up the top, name, contact information, and then that summary or objective. And it's brief. It's maybe 1 to 2 sentences. It's not going to be a paragraph. It's going to be a brief, concise statement. And this one specifically includes that they have 3+ years of experience. So really including those quantifiables. How much experience do you have? And I'm seeing that right away. And then I'm looking through your professional history and seeing the dates that you have and how long you've been in those positions, some quick, concise bullet points on your experience, and then education history and skills and abilities at the end. So a brief list of some skills and abilities that you have that are relevant to the position that you're applying for. And then a functional example is similar, the name and contact information at the top, a summary or objective, and that's going to be up to you, what makes the most sense for your skills and experience and where you're at in your transition, if that's what you're trying to do. And then, like I mentioned, the skills are first. And I might recommend grouping them by theme like they do here. I think that's really clear and helpful for the recruiter to understand. And in each of these, there are quantifiable metrics. So this first one says that they reduced onboarding process from 8 to 6 weeks and reduced their average customer representative call time by 90 seconds. The next one says that they surpassed their team goal by 12%. So you have really those quantifiable measurements. And like I said earlier, I'm reading through this summary and all of your skills and seeing right away that your skills match the minimum requirements for the position before I get to the relevant professional experience that you have listed. And then education at the bottom. So someone said the functional resume doesn't include dates. I think the example does include dates. If we could go back to that, Yesenia. And I would encourage you to include dates in the functional or a chronological, even if it's been some time before you've been in that position. Like I said, they're really seeing your skills first. And so hopefully are getting a good picture for you and wanting to give you that opportunity before they see that relevant experience. But if I'm not seeing the dates that are included, then I'm not getting a really good picture.
I would second that. That is so important, really, whenever you can really always add the dates. We know that sometimes it's not because you are the issue, right? Sometimes it could be management, right? And so like, if you have the skills, right, and you can tell us how long you've been employed somewhere, it at least gives us a sense of like, could this person actually perform this role? Because if not, just like what Samantha said, is somebody maybe not wanting to share that they only worked there, a month. But really, if you worked there 6 months, like that would make a difference for me, a half a year versus a month, and you decided that it was overwhelming, right? So give us that opportunity to see that so that perhaps we can give you the opportunity to be brought into that next step.
Before you move on, I do have a quick question about that on this resume. I noticed that the dates are not in a range, and I'm asking this specifically. Is that when the person left or when they started? Those years there? And I ask this because like my human resources, I was a corporate recruiter for Schwann's And I started working for Schwann's in the 90s and I finished in the early 2000s. So, having 90s on my resume is different than, early 2000s. So, but I can definitely see how this resume format would benefit me. But those dates again, thank you for some clarification.
Yeah, and I think for me, and Yesenia can share as well, it's more important for me to see how long you were in the position rather than how far away that you have that experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I would agree. Okay, so tailoring resume. So, every job is different, right? And so you really need to tailor your resume to highlight your skill sets as they address that particular position. So don't leave whoever is reviewing your resume wondering if you accidentally applied to the wrong job. I have thought that before when I'm reading through resumes. And it may be that the person, it's not that they're completely off, but it isn't really clear to me how they are connecting some of this experience. Like to put it in perspective of like, if you are a reporter, right? You want to apply to this reporter position, but most of your resume has editing. I might, information about being an editor, I might think, do they mean to apply to the editor position that we had open? Are they interested in reporting or do they want to be editing? Like I'm gonna have some questions. So that could be like a subtle, that's an example about how a subtle thing like that may make the recruiter wonder. Right? So paint a picture for them about how you meet the criteria. And I can assure you, if it's a coveted position, other people will be doing that. So you want to make sure that you are tailoring your resume, or it's possible that you might get disqualified when there are so many candidates and we're only able to bring a few in for interviews. You want to make sure that you're really touching on those key subjects. And back to, Samantha's point about using an objective, right? That's where you're stating that your goal is to get this job, right? And so really use the objective only when you're looking at transitioning careers, right? You're transitioning into an entirely different role or different career in a different field, right? Otherwise, the preferred contemporary way of doing it is to provide a resume summary. So the final thing I'll say on this is just, I cannot say it enough. Read that job post. And if they provide a job description, and sometimes they do, they post the entire thing. I know that we do at OPB. Read through that entire job description because that's going to tell you what skills the manager thinks that is needed. And without getting too deep into the weeds, when a job description is being built, I mean, it is a manager looking at it. It is the hiring. It is the manager's manager. It is HR, right? So we're all coming together to try to figure out what skills are needed. So really capture those skills if you have them, or transitional skills that will get you there. I think there's one chat. Okay, perfect. All right, so moving on to the next one here. Samantha? My apologies, I had the wrong slide there. So cover letters. So cover letters are helpful in helping tell the rest of the story. So you have the resume, right? The cover letter has the potential to increase your odds of getting an interview because it's filling in some of those holes. So this is communicating to the hiring panel, right? Or whoever is reading your resume, what attracted you to the position? So what makes this position awesome? So really focus on the work. So maybe you know about their benefits and their benefits are great. No need to put that here. I promise you, you will get a chance to talk about that in the next stage. But for now, the goal is to get you in the door for an interview, right? So focus specifically on the work experience that is motivating you to apply to this job. Sharing your skills and experience and how that benefits to the company. So that work that you said that you loved, well, tell them why you're qualified to do that kind of work. So what skills and experience can you bring to the position? And again, be thoughtful here that you're not reiterating everything that's in your resume. We've already read that. This is a good space to have like some of those softer skills, right, that you can bring to the position. Read the website for the company you're applying. What services do they offer? What is their product? This storytelling piece, you don't have to use it. Use it if you feel that it is appropriate. Because again, you don't want a very long cover letter. 1 page is fine. So a few paragraphs is really all you need. Where you use storytelling is if there is a situation that like a project or something that really conceptualizes some of the work that you did. that aligns with their the work that is being done. So getting a sense of pain points, right? If you know someone who works at the company, have a conversation with them. What are the pain points? What are the things that need to be resolved? And think about, reflect on your skills and how that your skills can serve that. You don't have to know anyone either. You can just apply, but do the research, right? Know what they're looking for. So again, the storytelling piece, only if you have a really compelling reason to add it that can further enhance your cover letter, then use it. And then finally, make a connection to your values and tie that to their mission and values, right? So for OPB, our mission is this: Oregon Public Broadcasting, right? So it's giving voice to the community, connecting Oregon and its neighbors, and illuminating a wider world. We also happen to have an equity mission, and that is to better serve all communities across the Northwest and to create a workplace and culture where all OPB employees feel valued and they feel seen and that they can thrive. So if I read those and I was applying to a position, and which I did, right? What would I say in my cover letter? So I would talk about how public media is important to me because it does good in my community, right? I would also talk about how I approach HR work from an equity lens and how that's important to embed all that work so that people can be their authentic selves. So what I'm showing in this, right, cover letters, I'm showing them what my values are and sharing that they in fact align with the organization's values.
Okay. And then as we wrap up here, just thinking about getting organized and just some helpful hints, we would recommend including your name and, sorry, I'm trying not to look at the chat while I'm talking at the same time. We would recommend using your name and the title of the position. And I mentioned at the beginning, PDF formats really the most desirable. You could do Word if you have to, depending on kind of what systems you're working on and what makes the most sense for you, but PDF is probably the most desirable there. And then when I'm applying for jobs, if I'm applying for lots of jobs, I am keeping an email folder in my inbox, and I'll keep a record of who I applied to in that folder. So I'll just label it something like jobs and just keep that record there so that I can go back and look in my email at which jobs that I applied to when, and keep track of sort of whether they've responded to me or not, and making sure that I remember the job title of every position I applied for. And Yesenia, you might have other tips as well.
Yeah, I think you really covered those well. I would just say naming conventions, because for me, I like to save them in a file folder, right? And so earlier we talked about, you know, name your resume, right? So position and name. And your name, right, for the recruiter. Well, that also serves another purpose. If you name it by the position first and then your name, then when you're looking at your own folder, you can see, oh, I applied to Safeway. So you're looking for that S. And so things are going to be in order, right? Now, if you are someone who is just a dates person and they help you in some way, you could even go so far as to name it by the position. Then the next part of the naming convention is your name and then the date. So at a glance, you could see, like, when did I apply to this position if you're applying to a lot of them? So that's the only thing the other thing I would add. The date part is not necessary. It's only if it serves you.
Okay. Well, we've answered some questions throughout the presentation, but we'd like to open up the floor for these last few minutes for questions from you.
Can you go back to the last slide, please?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And you can throw those in the chat. I did see one question, or say them out loud. I did see one question about emojis. I don't know about you, Yesenia. I would probably avoid using emojis in any format, but I don't know if you have more to add on that. I wouldn't use them.
I wouldn't use them either. And to the person that said, can you put it in your email? Honestly, for most jobs, you are applying through the ATS. But if you do email, I would still highly suggest that you have a specific document, right? Because if this is a company that you are emailing things to, then there's an opportunity that they are also the company that prints out stuff. And do you want them to have a printed email, or do you actually want them to have a nice formatted letter?
You have a typo on the last slide.
Oh, thank you.
We're sorry about that. Thank
It's okay.
So on keeping organized, if you have your own system of organization where you can access that, and it's not necessarily in your email, can you stick with what you know, or do you need to try to learn a whole new system?
Stick with what works for you. If it's been working and you can easily find and access your things when you call for an interview, then go for it. Keep your own system. These are some ideas for folks who maybe haven't thought that piece through yet. And we do have a question in the chat. Can the ATS read any resume? So here's the thing. It depends. So, your attachment will come through, but the issue is if it's not parsing out that information correctly, if it's not putting it in the right fields, that could be a problem where the recruiter is not getting that information in order, or it could also create a situation where it creates such bad formatting for the ATS that it doesn't even get to the recruiter. It doesn't get to that talent acquisition specialist because the system has said, oh, this is not a good resume. And it's just like filtering it out as a no, right? And you don't want your resume to be an automatic no over some formatting that was kind of complex and super fancy, but it didn't, it didn't make it through to the ATS, because then it's pointless, right?
I'd just like to add, back in November, we had Amanda Rue from JobScan, and she did a wonderful workshop. So I've noticed there's been several questions about the ATS. If you want to go back and watch that, it's a great workshop, and it clarifies a lot of these questions and might be very helpful to you.
Great, thank you, Grace.
I had a
Did
question.
you have a hand raised?
I do live theater, and I'm an independent contractor and do stage management. So I have been doing it for 20 years, and I have a really long list of places that I've worked. How would I be able, what would be the best way to condense that? Because I'm applying for stage management jobs, so it's all within my field. But if I listed what I've done, it'd be like 3-4 pages long.
Yeah, Yesenia, did you want to take that one?
Yeah, I think we can both kind of tackle this one because that's the thing, right? It just depends on who gets your resume, right? I would, in a situation like that where it's super long, right, and you have a lot to cover, I might look at, that functional resume potentially, and highlighting the things that you have done that are most related. I could do it that way, or maybe if it all feels very related, just include the, maybe the 3 last jobs, that you have had on there that line up with that experience. And so you could keep it chronological, and you could just do not every single job. If you got your job right at a high school, right? Maybe that one doesn't make the cut. It's just the last 3 jobs, and then you can keep it functional. Does that make sense? So there's a couple of options. I tend to prefer the functional with just the last 3 jobs, but you could also do a chronological and just highlight the top positions.
Okay, thanks.
Good question. Someone asked in the chat if they don't meet all of the minimum requirements of a position, should they still apply? That someone said they might be shortchanging themselves if they're not applying to jobs that you don't meet every qualification for. Yesenia, you can add to this. I would say go ahead and give it a try. If you meet most of the minimum requirements, yes, I would say go ahead and apply for that position. I think it depends on your skills and abilities, but we're also looking at things like transferable skills and soft skills, like Yesenia mentioned. So I would say give it a try. Yesenia, do you have more to say on that?
Yeah, I would say, you don't know how many resumes a position is actually getting. So if they have less, right, it might be that your chances increase because you mostly meet the criteria, right? So you don't know the quality of candidates that are there. I would say if you meet most of them, like Samantha said, give it a shot. If you don't, then maybe look through what are ways to get yourself there through other activities. If this is like your dream job, like what are ways through volunteering or other ways that you can start to kind of lean into that position. But if you have most of them, go for it. Jashira, I see you. I'm hoping I pronounced your name correctly. I see that you have your hand up.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, it's Joshi, by the way. It's all good. I'll make it simple for you guys. But I just wanted to add a couple, or like 2 cents, if that's okay. As far as the ATS system, I've had my fair share of looking through resumes as well. And so I completely like agree with that. I noticed that Grace, she added the link for the workshop from late last year. And yeah, you know, the simpler, the better for sure when it comes to the resumes. And then another thing too, that you guys can probably like agree with this or correct me if I'm wrong, but it's also very nice. So say that like Sue, I know that you said you talked about your experience, you do like contract work and everything. That we have had people where they have done like contract to hire or seasonal positions and stuff like that. And so I know that sometimes like people, they get worried about the tenure piece, whether a project is not long enough or it's, you know, whatever, this and that compared to the rest of their work experience. So say that you do have like that one-off position every once in a while where it says like, oh, that was just a contract through a staffing agency per se, or this was just a seasonal job for Target or something like that over the summer and everything. It's always a nice to point that out as well, because at least for me, when I've looked at resumes in the past, I can look at someone, I'm like, oh, okay, like they worked 2 years here, they worked a few years here. Oh, but why is it just a few months here? And so if it just puts, you know, in the title like seasonal administrative assistant, then that covers that for me as well too. So it's a nice to have in there.
That's an excellent point. Yeah, maybe in parentheses, even seasonal or internship or temporary position. Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. PJ, you have your hand up too.
Thank you. Yeah, I had another question about the functional resume. I just heard someone say a few minutes ago that it just the last 3 years on a functional resume. Is that correct?
I think I may have said as an example, the last 3 positions, through like what fits. Certainly, you know, keep it to like 1 page, or if you need to, it's going into that 2nd page. But yeah, it doesn't need to be the last 3 positions. It's whatever fits depending on what, yeah, you're going functional or chronological and what that spacing looks like.
Thank you so much. You've been so helpful. Really, thank you.
I have one more question.
Uh-huh.
So with mine, if I just did like the 3, 4, whatever last ones that I did, is it good to put, you know, additional experience upon request or something like that, so that they know that there's more there?
You might put how many years of experience you have in that summary at the top.
Okay.
And you can reference it again in the cover letter, like that you have X amount of experience. You can reference other places that you've worked in the cover letter and skills that apply. If you're only including the last 3.
Okay. And then if I like, basically there's a certain little things, but for the most part, stage manager does the same thing. So,
yeah,
you know, if I put, you know, whatever the responsibilities were, it kind of covers like all of the jobs that I've had. So should I just like list that like once as, you know, as a stage manager, I've done blah, blah, blah?
One of the things that I would do, and Samantha, feel free to add on to this, but so again, there's the responsibilities, and then there are things that are going to make you stand out of achievements that you did in each one of these particular stage jobs. So I would say, you know, a stage job X, right? Whatever that title of that company, like what kind of awesome things did you do? What quantifiable, you know, things did you set up staging in a specific way that was innovative and it led to, you know, changes organizationally, right? Like list some of those things that you did that are part of the duties, but that you really made an impact on. And then you can do that for all 3, 4, you know, however many. And so you're giving them a sense of like, yeah, this is what I did, but and these are the areas that I, you know, made an impact. Sam, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, no, I think there are a couple of different ways that you could do it. So I would play around with what works for you and what works best for the spacing. But yeah, you're spot on.
Okay, thank you.
When I've reviewed resumes and they had that same job position at several different companies, they repeat the job description of what they did. So I kind of like what you gals are saying is like find the key highlight of that position. And instead of repeating it for each job description, you know, kind of individualize each one.
If you can. Yeah, absolutely, Grace. I see another hand raised. Sylvia.
Yes, I was lowering my hand. So you said to not leave a gap in your resume, and you're talking about age bias. Well, mine will kind of collide in that, and I'm wondering what you would advise. I thought of a couple of things, but I wanted to see what you guys thought. I've been out of the workforce for 4 years because I was raising my grandson at that time. Now he's back with his mom, but grandson, and I mean, that sort of does age bias. I know I don't look like I'm a grandma and I'm good with that, but they don't know that on paper yet. So how would you advise that
Well, I hope I'm understanding the
Yeah, around
question.
that.
Yeah, I wouldn't include why you haven't been in the workforce on your resume. I think there are tons of reasons why someone would have gaps in their resume, and hopefully an employer, a recruiter is recognizing that there are so many reasons why someone would have gaps. And so I would recommend that functional layout where you're seeing the skills that you have first before we're seeing that work history. So I'm really getting a picture of how your skills relate to the position before I see where the last position that you've held, and I can see that might have been 4 years ago. Does that make sense?
It kind of does, but I'm wanting to go into working in a classroom, and the last position I held was in-home care for seniors and disability services. So that I would need to do the transferable skills piece anyway, but yeah. So
yeah, I think there are lots of transferable skills there in terms of you know, caring for folks and teaching folks and being a good supporter in the spaces. So I would highlight those things, and someone will see how those skills translate before they're seeing your last position held. Does that make sense?
Sort of, it does. Yeah. But overlapping that, I was a sub in in 2 different school districts. So
yeah, I would definitely list that on the resume then. Yesenia, do you have more to add to that?
No, more so emphasizing what you're saying here is like really do a great job of connecting. These are the skills that I have, and this is how they can serve you in this position. And so that cover letter is going to be a good place to really build on that, because they'll see, you know, where you've worked before, right? And they'll be able to see, I think in most cases, recruiters are skilled in like being able to see, oh, but these are transitional skills, but you want to make sure that you do that part, because if your resume also goes to a panel, that may not be what they do day to day. And so, paint the picture for them. Even if you have worked elsewhere, highlight the skills for this position that are going to serve you well as transitional skills. So spend extra time thinking about that and put it in the cover letter too.
Okay,
Yeah.
maybe we'll just go ahead and do one more question here, and then it's 10 after already, so we need to wrap it up.
Thank you, Grace. I see one hand raised. Nitya, I hope I'm saying that correctly.
No, it's Nitya, but nobody ever says it right on the first try, so you're fine.
Thank you.
My question is kind of about job titles, because the field that I work in is very niche. And so my job title, which is an accessible education technician or an alternative formats technician, never ever appears on any of the lists, drop-down lists of like job search websites like Indeed and stuff like that. And so whenever I try to use those websites to find work, I always get inundated with a bunch of jobs that just are not anywhere near anything that I'm looking for, you know? like customer service or copywriting or like computer techs. And that's not what I do. I create accessible accommodations for students in higher education. And I love my work. And, you know, that's like my career field that I would like to stay in. So I'm just wondering, like, how do you navigate that? Or like, you know, find more niche positions?
Yeah, I would start, and you probably have already done this, but a good starting point is really taking a look more so of like, this is what my title is. What are the things that I do? What is this job? What are other places calling this job, right? So like, if you work in a specific industry, if you work in a school and you're doing accommodations and that kind of thing for students, and like go on to other schools and kind of see what, you know, if a position like that happens to be available, but just that's kind of building your repertoire in terms of like, what is this job called elsewhere? And also breaking it down to the components. Like if you're looking on Indeed and you're doing a search, you could do the advanced search and then look for keywords about some of the duties that you have. Like you could say like students, and then another keyword could be accommodations, and then another keyword could be
brings up jobs for access counselors, which I'm definitely not, but like document specialist or something, remediation. I don't know, it's just weird. It's like a growing field, but it's like not recognized yet or something.
Yeah, so break it down by its main components and use those as the keywords. I think a good place, because Indeed is such a big hiring space, right? It's like, and they do have that advanced function, is to like figure out like the 3 top skills. And then if you do, what is it called, Sam? Is it the semicolon, with the dot? Yeah, do that, and do that with like 3 words. It might help, and to kind of at least start giving you a sense of like what positions are coming up, and then you kind of take that research and keep going from there. Sam, do you have other less cumbersome ways to sort this out?
I don't know that I have much advice in terms of searching on Indeed, but I definitely agree with looking at what other industries or what other organizations are titling those positions. Like for us, some people call us people and culture, some people call us human resources, some people call us talent acquisition or recruiters. So looking at what other folks are calling their positions.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I think we've learned a lot. We've had some great questions and great answers, and just really want to thank Samantha and Yesenia for being here, taking some time to share their thoughts with us. They're going to share their PowerPoint presentation with me, so I can send out an email to everyone with that, as well as it will be posted later today on our website. If you want to just go back and rewatch this and review again, you can do so. If you are interested in a resume review, you can send your resume to me at employment@insight.org, and I will gladly take a look at it. And other than that, I think it is a wrap. Thank you again, ladies, and everyone for joining us today. We appreciate it. And if you don't have a job by June 20th, please come to our job fair. All right.
Did you say that email was employment@insight.org?
Correct.
Well, thank you for having us here.
Thanks, Grace.
Oh, you're more than welcome.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.